Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be talking about a bunch of popular, completed fantasy series that I still want to read. Now when I will read them, I have no idea because there's so many on this list, but I do want to get to them, and I think most of these books I own in some format, so it's just a matter of when, not if. They are not ranked in any particular order. Let's just jump into the video. So the first series I have on this list is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. This is a series that I've been really wanting to get into for a while because I've heard it's very, very political. That's pretty much all I know about it. I don't know anything else about it, just that a lot of people love it and the politics is apparently excellent. And I've said this many times before, I love politics in my books. Probably one of my favourite things in fantasy, especially when it's done really well, and I've just heard it's done really, really, really well in this series. It is a 4-book series. I believe it's completed now, and I think there are also some kind of short stories and novellas surrounding the world. I've heard really good things about Ken Liu's writing style in general. I have some of his short story collections that I haven't read yet, but this one I cannot wait to read. I also own this in like multiple formats, so like I said, it's definitely a matter of when and not if. I might try and get to this one next year, but don't be surprised if I don't. The next one is a series that I'm definitely going to start next year, and it's a mammoth series, and it's one of the kind of goats of fantasy. That is Malazan by Steven Erikson. This is a 10 or 11 book series, I believe. Every single book is huge, and it's just an incredibly complex, rich, detailed world. It's very much dark, grimdark fantasy, and I've heard, there's definitely highs and lows between the books. Some books are really well written, others kind of drag a little bit. I've heard great things generally about the character work, and I just think, as somebody who loves Baker and as somebody who loves grimdark and dark fantasy, this is going to be one of those series that I'm just going to absolutely devour when I do start it. No idea how many of the books I'll get through next year, but I was originally planning to read one Malazan book a month. I just don't think that's going to happen, because I want to take my time with this series like I did with the Prince of Nothing trilogy and the broader Second Apocalypse world that Baker created. And from what I understand, Baker was very much influenced by Erikson, so I'm very excited to get to him for that reason. Next on my list is another series that I am hoping to start next year, and that is The Assassin's Apprentice, or the Farseer Trilogy by Robin Hobb. This is the first trilogy in a much bigger connected world that Hobb has created. I think there's like over 20 books now in the world as a whole, which is insane, but like also incredible. And I've had very mixed feelings about the original Farseer trilogy. Some people really love it and some people really hate it, and I've not really met anybody in the middle, so I think I'm gonna have a very similar experience. I hope I love it, but I've heard some very questionable things about the main character. But I'm just going to go along with the flow and try and minimize my expectations as much as I possibly can, because I think this could be a series that I really love. It's just a matter of whether I'm going to gel with the characters, because it is a very character-centric series from what I understand. So this one I will definitely try to get to next year. I think Malazan and Assassin's Apprentice are the only ones that I'm really trying to get to next year, and then everything else, I'll see where I can fit it in. Let's go to the next one, and that is the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. I don't know the name of the series, it's just gone out of my head. This is a trilogy as well, from what I understand, and I believe this is written very differently from kind of typical fantasy, and I'm very curious to see if I will gel with that type of writing. I have zero clue as to what this series is about, and when I ask people to tell me a summary of this book, nobody can tell me, because I think it's just one of those series that is kind of best enjoyed as you read it, if that makes sense. No clue when I'll get to this one, but Jemisin is an author that I'm generally very curious about, and hopefully I might be able to get to her next year. Next on my list, we have the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch, the first book being The Lies of Locke Lamora, and this is a series that I've heard really good things about. I am kind of cheating with this one because this isn't a completed series. I believe 4 books are out, and the author plans to write another 2. I think he took a bit of a hiatus from writing for personal reasons, and I don't know much more beyond that, but I hope, he's able to finish the series at some point. The first book apparently very much functions as a standalone, So I think I will read that one sooner rather than later, because I will just read the first book and then wait for the author to finish the series, hopefully, and then I can continue on with the series. But it's very reminiscent of kind of a heist story, which I do really enjoy, especially when it's done very well, especially when there's a lot of twists and turns and I can't predict what's going to happen. It's always the risk with heist stories, is that you can always kind of see where it's going. But I've heard this one is not very predictable, so I'm really looking forward to that, and I've heard the character work is absolutely excellent. Next on my list, we have An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I don't know the name of the series. It might just be An Ember in the Ashes. But this is a quartet. It's completed. It's kind of new adult, or it's positioned to me as new adult. And I've had this series for many, many years. It's just a matter of getting to it. I might actually try and get to it this year, because I always find young adult and new adult a lot easier to consume. And I think Sabaa Tahir's writing style, I remember reading a sample of it a few years back and I really loved it. So I might actually try and fit this in at like Christmas and just binge the series, because I do own all 4 books in hardback. There are so many things that I've heard about this series that I know I'm going to love. And even though I don't read YA or new adult at all anymore, this is the one exception to that rule. So I'm very excited. Next, we have The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. This is also a trilogy. I believe the 3rd book just came out early this year, if I remember correctly. And another series that I've heard really, really great things about. I also think this is slightly new adult, maybe adult. Somebody correct me down below, please. But this, I've heard really good things. I don't know anything about the plot and I don't want to, but I've just heard excellent things about Stewart's writing style, and I've heard the character work is absolutely excellent as well. So that's enough to sell me to pick it up. Next, we have The Forgotten Cemeteries Quartet, I think it is, by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. The first book is The Shadow of the Wind. I'm going to pick this book up very soon, I think within the next couple of weeks, because I think it's just going to fit the vibes very well. I've heard it's quite like mysterious, quite atmospheric, and I love those types of books, especially at this time of the year. It's also set in Barcelona, which I spent a decent amount of time in last year, so it'll be nice to go to a place that I visited but in a different time, because I believe it's set somewhere in the 20th century. I can't remember what exact time frame, but this is one I'm really, really excited to get to. I also believe the first book functions quite well as a standalone, so even though I do have the whole series in paperback, I can at least not feel pressured to have to go into the wider series after I finish the first book. Next, we have another series that I'm hoping to get to this year, or at least the first book, and that is The Black Company by Glenn Cook. This is also a trilogy, and I've heard it's some of the kind of very early grimdark fantasy. Joe Abercrombie has also referenced this series as a series that he really likes, and honestly, that is enough for me. I read the first sentence for another video that I did that may or may not be up, and I loved the first sentence, and it very much did give me Joe Abercrombie vibes, so I'm very excited for that one too. It's also military fantasy, which I do love, and I have actually missed not reading military fantasy for a while. Next, we have Kings of Paradise by Richard Nell. I don't know the name of the series. I think it's Ash and Sand. It's also a trilogy. The books are really chunky, so that's why I haven't started this series yet. But this is a self-published series, and it's very dark from what I understand. I believe there is a military aspect to this series too. Again, I have no clue about the plot. I don't tend to look at plots in general. I think if I'm ever slightly hesitant, then I will. I generally like to learn more about the features of the book. Is the character work compelling? Is the plot well paced? You know, these types of things. If those things work, the plot is almost secondary in a way, and I don't really care about the ins and outs of the details of what's happening, if that makes sense. It's more like how it's written that is more important to me. So this is a multi-POV story as well, I believe, and I've heard mixed things on one of the POVs, but I'm going to go into it with little expectation and kind of see how I get on. So that one I'm really excited. I also think it's the only self-published series I have on this list, which is silly because I have a lot more than that, but it's the one that I'm hoping to get to sooner rather than later. Next, we have Smile is Fair by Rebecca Levine. This is also a trilogy, and I've heard really good things about the series. I've heard it's very fast-paced, very action-packed, and the books are quite short, so you can just kind of get through it quite quickly. I've heard really good things about the character work and the plot work as well. And so this is a series I was actually planning to start earlier this year, but I just was not in the mood for grim dark fantasy at that point. Not even grim dark fantasy, I just wasn't in the mood for like heavy fantasy, which I believe there is some pretty strong fantasy elements to this story. So when I'm in the mood for that, I will be sure to pick it up. Then we have another mammoth series, and that is The Dark Tower by Stephen King. This is another like 9+ book series, I think. I was very fortunate to be able to get all of the books brand new, secondhand, for about £20 earlier this year, and it was amazing. I was so happy about it, and it was also the covers that I really wanted. So that was really fun to get those. But this is a series that I've been really wanting to get to for a while, but I don't really like having tons of series on the go, especially when they're really long series. So I think once I finish Malazan, this will be the next long series that I pick up. So I think this will be read in 2025 most likely. Next we have Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. This is another series that I'm actually hoping to start this year. I believe it's 4 books or 2 books, but it's like the 2 books are split. I don't know. Somebody who's more educated on this topic, please tell me down below. But this is a book that I've heard amazing things about. Amazing things about. And I don't know much about the plot, except that the book is written from the perspective of somebody who's been exiled, I believe. And I love stories when they're told retrospectively. I just love them. Some of my favourite books are told in that way. I don't know why, I just feel like it makes it feel much more intimate. And even though you know the outcome in the sense that the main character is still alive, generally, it's more about the journey of how we ended up here. And I love that stuff. So very curious about this one. I have been warned a little bit about this book. Apparently it's definitely an acquired taste, but I'm very curious, and I think I'm gonna like it. All right, we only have a few more. Next we have Hyperion by Dan Simmons. This is a trilogy, I think, and I've heard really good things about this. I believe the way that the story is told is very reminiscent of the Canterbury Tales, which I read when I was very young and I loved. I haven't read the Canterbury Tales recently, but I would really like to. But I've heard very good things about Hyperion. I do believe it's told from multiple perspectives though, given the kind of mechanism in which the story is told. And naturally, when you have a multi-POV story, some POVs are going to be better than others. So I think this is one of those ones where go into it with the expectation that you're not going to love every single POV equally, and that's okay. And I'm okay with that. I do love multi-POV stories, and it's fine that not every single POV is going to be loved in the same way. But I can't wait to read this one. Might actually try and read this one this year with a friend of mine. We might buddy read it. We'll see. All right, next we have Kushiel's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. This is a really wide world that Jacqueline Carey has written. She wrote an original series, which I think had like 3 or 4 books. And then there's a second series that's set in the same world, but set later on, which has another like 3 or 4 books. And this was another series that I actually picked up secondhand. I picked up the whole series because I saw it really cheap in my local bookstore, and I have them all. And with this one, I'm really excited to get to it. It's just I've heard it's quite heavy, and there's some very heavy thematic work, which is fine for someone like me because that's what I love, and I love kind of dark fantasy. But I think there's certain things that I've heard about this book that is just making me think, read it at a different time. Like, I don't think right now I'm in the right mood for it, but I do think this is a series that I'm going to really love, and I can't wait to read it. Like, I really can't wait. I've heard really good things about Carey's writing style as well. And then the next 2 I'm also kind of cheating because both of them aren't completed. Both authors are alive, so hopefully they will both complete them at some point or another. And by me saying this, you probably guess what they are. The first one is Game of Thrones, or A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. I did read the first 3 books many years ago, and then I watched the series, and then I stopped reading the books. So I'm still waiting to kind of forget the main plot points of the series. I think in the next couple of years I'll probably pick this series up because I do really love the world of Game of Thrones, and I do remember loving the character work because I've heard Martin is some of the best when it comes to amazing character work. I do own all the books already. It's just I want to forget the series as much as I can. so that I can kind of look at it with fresh eyes, essentially. And then last but most certainly not least, we have The Name of the Wind, or the Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. I believe this is going to be a trilogy. There are 2 books out with a prequel short story, I think, and I own all 3 books, and this is one of those series that is very similar to the Farseer Trilogy, where I've only heard people either really loving it or really hating it. And I've heard that comes down to how much you gel with the main character, Kvothe. From what I've heard of him, I don't know if I'm going to particularly like this character type, but we will see. I'm very, very curious to pick this one up. I would actually really like to pick this one up sooner rather than later. I don't know if the second book ends on a cliffhanger. I really hate ending books on a cliffhanger. That's why I generally wait for series to be completed, unless I know that I can read it generally as a standalone. So anybody who has read the first 2 books, please let me know if it ends on a cliffhanger or if it's quite contained story-wise. Because if it does end quite contained, or if it does end in quite a contained way, I will pick this up sooner rather than later, because I did read the first paragraph of it for a video that I filmed and I loved the sound of it. The writing was beautiful. I'm just very curious to see where I'll land on the spectrum of love and hate. So that's it. That's the last one. Let me know if there are any other kind of popular fantasy series that you think are worth me taking a look at. Ideally, they have been completed, but I'm always open to hearing suggestions based on, you know, what you guys like and what you think I'd like based on my previous videos and what I've said in this video. If you like this one, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please give us a subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay safe as always. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.